Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Fluid Operations. Today, we're going to be talking to Megan Plumlee, Director of Research for Orange County Water District. In just a moment, she is going to be introducing herself. As you know, always with me is Miller Truby, my co-host. Miller, what's going on today?
It's a good day. Happy to be here on a Friday. Happy to be talking to Megan, and happy to be doing a podcast again. We had kind of a 2-month layoff there, a little summer vacation for the podcast, but now we're back at it. I'm in a new state, which is kind of fun.
That's right.
Yeah, it's nice to be back.
Well, I'm glad to be back as well. We're excited to be having these conversations, back talking to everybody. I know we've got a lot of conferences coming up towards the end of the year, so there's going to be a lot of different conversations, a lot of different trainings, all that kind of stuff coming up. But here we are today. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today. We're, again,
Sure.
really excited to have you on the podcast. I know we just met with you not too long ago at your guys' office, which was fantastic as well. So we appreciate you taking the time to do that. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick introduction, and then we'll just jump right into it.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Megan Plumlee. I'm with Orange County Water District. So there's several Orange counties in the country. So maybe I should clarify we're in Southern California, and we're a groundwater management agency, and I oversee our research department, or the R&D group.
That's fantastic. R&D, that's, I don't hear that a lot at a lot of the utilities. So that's a unique position. So do you know how that position came about?
Yeah, so OCWD has actually had an R&D team since about the 1980s, originally under a different name and eventually renamed R&D to give it kind of a broad term. And sometimes people tell me, maybe you should rebrand and call it like the innovation group or something like that. But I actually like R&D a lot. I feel like it really describes what we do, studying issues and then trying to develop that into solutions.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
and that's you guys, I think, are seen as a leading utility group, at least in the United States, with your ties to some of the international community and the initiatives that OCWD has taken on. So it kind of makes sense to have an R&D group, looking at pushing the envelope. What is new? What is being rolled out? What is being worked on? What are the academics of this water treatment industry working on that we can try and be an early adopter of? So yeah, it's great to have that, and I think it's really valuable for the industry as a whole to have big utilities that have R&D groups like yours.
It is, and I think there's a lot more R&D going on at utilities than people realize. We just sometimes, don't call it that, or oftentimes don't have a dedicated group. But certainly, staff at an agency, small, medium, and large ones, they're going to get reached out to by startup companies with some new innovation that they want the utility to consider. They might be reached out to by a local university or one from even another country to provide utility perspective on something and have a conversation about a study and participate in studies, because academics need like that real world test bed to get water samples and experiment, maybe bring something on site like a type of sensor. So it happens, but that work falls to maybe your engineering group or your hydrogeologists or whatever, would be the technical field that pertains. And so what I think is so, you know, so much more efficient, I guess, about having a dedicated R&D group is you have people where that's their focus, so they have the bandwidth for that. But ultimately, they're kind of like a support department because they have to collaborate with the other parts of the agency where that technology would be or study would be applicable, right? So we work with our operations team on things like digital solutions, or our engineers working with other local agencies on PFAS and treatment for PFAS. So we have kind of a broad spectrum of topics. We do molecular biology work too, for example. Within our 7 or 8 person team, it's pretty diverse. We kind of follow the topics based on what we think could be something we might want to implement or evaluate at the district. And we can even hire like shorter term staff if we need some more technical depth in a certain area. So we get to have a lot of fun doing important stuff and having the bandwidth for it, because we're a bit shielded from the day-to-day of running a treatment plant or running a water agency and working on studying problems.
So you don't have the emergencies.
We don't have the emergencies. There's almost never an emergency. Even with the grant final report, you can request a deadline extension. So that's
So
nice.
that is a huge benefit. So
It is.
I'm curious, I mean, obviously you had an interest in water at some point, or, how did you get there? I mean, that's a really unique position to end up in research and development in a water company in Orange
Right.
County, California. That's different.
It is different. It feels unique in the sense that even though, like I was saying, there is research and studies going on at utilities, it is more unique to have like a dedicated group. And I do feel like I have a really special job getting to manage that kind of a group, and it's really fun. I guess like a lot of careers, I might have stumbled into it. I was interested in
Mhm.
science and engineering in school,
Okay.
and kind of stumbled into the field of environmental engineering, which is what I studied in graduate school. And I was actually sitting in a class in grad school. And that's when I learned and realized what happens to water when you flush the toilet or where it comes from out of the tap. I really had no idea, which is a little bit sad and maybe embarrassing to share that you can get all the way through college and be like a science person, but still take for granted the fact that clean water comes to you and the dirty water goes away. And now I get to close the loop on that, quite literally, being in the part of the water sector on water recycling. So that's a big focus of my R&D team, being that we do a lot of that at Orange County Water District. So I even understand how that happens now, which is pretty amazing.
It,
Absolutely.
it's funny, and it's a source of, I think, embarrassment for professionals in this industry, because a lot of us, I mean, I didn't follow the same path that you did, but I did follow the same sort of path of from something else into water. And despite having the advantages of even having family members who've been in this industry for a long time, I still didn't understand it until I started working on it. And they're like, oh, right, there's a lot that goes on that just nobody
Yeah.
sees. And so if you're a member of the public, how can we as water professionals expect the public to understand it when so many of us didn't really understand it until we literally started living in and working in these treatment plants? And even today,
Mm-hmm.
there's still new treatment processes that come out. With somebody will, talk about some new thing, and I'm like, I don't have any idea how that works, or what that is, or what you're talking about. And it's until I stand in front of it, I'm not going to learn it. And it's a hard thing because we want the public to understand what we're all doing, and it's
Right.
not easy to do that education, which I think is, maybe not necessarily related to your R&D position, but OCWD in general, I think, has done a nice job in the United States of being sort of a source of public visibility and outreach with the groundwater replenishment system there, of not hiding, that process, not
Yes.
hiding what's being done. So has that been an important
Yes.
part of your journey in the R&D group as well, is to make sure that that is sort of publicly visible and what's being worked on to do that outreach stuff?
Yes, so we're a relatively small organization, and there is a lot of interest in our huge water recycling project. It's the world's largest potable reuse treatment plant. So we have a lot of visitors because of an established, education program we have. We do tours, we have a public affairs department, and that team pulls on other staff like myself within the district to help give certain tours. So they do, the bulk of it, but they'll bring in folks like myself from R&D or folks from our engineering team, certain executive staff to meet with different groups and help with some of the more technical tours. So I get to be a part of the tours and the education side every now and then when public affairs pulls me in, which is a lot of fun. So we walk folks through the plant, and since advanced water purification is actually pretty compact compared to things like traditional sewage treatment or water reclamation plants, you really can just walk through our facility, despite it being the world's largest, and see how we take what was once water that was going to be thrown away after it had been used by in homes and businesses and had gone down the shower drains and other types of drains like toilets. Yes, it's true. And you can see how we take that water that after it was initially treated up to a certain point by our neighbor, which is the Orange County Sanitation District, it flows over to us, and we do 3 steps of advanced treatment. So you walk the plant during these tours, and at the end, you can taste the water, and it's delicious. It tastes just like water because it is. And yeah, folks, seeing is believing. It's a lot of fun, and very, like I said, very walkable. So it's pretty impressive.
Tasting is believing too. I think that's. I've been lucky enough to get to do that at a few different reclamation facilities around the world, and it's always an interesting step to take, to think, all right, I'm actually going to drink this now, and hey, you know what?
Yeah.
It's fine. It's not a big deal.
I love what you just said. You heard me go, ooh, because you said tasting is believing. And I was just thinking maybe that's a great new like sticker or
Oh, yeah.
catchphrase that we could hashtag.
That one's for free. That you can have it.
Thank you.
I always chuckle because everyone I live by the water too. So I live in South Carolina. So I'm on the opposite side of the country as you. And, you get into the water and people are swimming in it and taking that water into their mouth. And your water coming out of that is going to taste way better than what you
It
get when you're swimming in the ocean and everywhere else. So just saying. So it's kind of funny. But so as you guys are um, making decisions and going through the R&D process, when you bring something into the utility, how long do you guys evaluate it before you implement it?
Good question. I would say it really depends. Each project, each technology is so different. So it's really a
Mhm.
conversation. Um, if I had to pick a number, I'd say, if it's some, water treatment technology or a sensor, absolute minimum would be 6 months, but
Mhm.
probably more like a year, year and a half. And then usually more questions come up, like, what about under these set of conditions? Or, hey, that result was interesting. Let's explore that a little more. And then if something looks, pretty compelling, maybe it's something we really would consider implementing. Usually there's more questions, so doing some kind of phase two. So it can take a while. We're a pretty
Yeah.
risk averse industry. So as you can imagine, we're making drinking water for people. So if it's, the treatment process itself, then it's probably going to need a good, runway of validation time. Something else like a sensor,
Mhm.
maybe not so much. There's not as much risk to that, other than that economic investment of maybe purchasing something and then having it not work out. So it's great if we can kind of try something for a little while first.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good thing to know because I don't think the general public understands how much time is invested in evaluating these things before we send it to the city council to be approved or to any regulatory authority or whatever. I mean, there's a lot that goes into these decisions. They're not just fly by the seat of your pant type decisions. They're not knee
Mm-hmm.
jerk
Mm-hmm.
reactions to something. Hey, there's a new technology. Let's install that today.
Yeah.
I would love for
Yeah.
you to do that. That would help us out.
I'm sure it can be frustrating on the technology developer side where you have other potential clients that might be more nimble.
Mhm.
But like traditionally municipal, water supply,
Right.
and the sewage treatment side, wastewater treatment is not quite as nimble. But they also can be big facilities, so maybe that
Right.
translates into, a good
Yeah.
win for a technology developer. But yeah, my understanding is that a lot of water related technologies first can get their kind of foothold in related industries like food and beverage.
Hmm.
Um, so, for example, like certain membrane technologies might be implemented at a facility like Coca-Cola that's making um, the ingredient water in a
Yep.
purified way because they want that consistent taste no matter where the tap water came from, and they'll put it through a certain water technology, and then maybe that's where a new technology can kind of get experience and grow, and then
Hmm.
kind of come over to the municipal side. So we see that path at times. And that's good
Sure.
for us to see that there was like a larger scale implementation and some data. But it's interesting, a lot of times we see then technologies when we try them at our facility, they struggle because we do have a more challenging or a more impaired water source, and so membranes will foul quicker and stuff just will maybe get gummed up a little more than people expect, based on what the model told them. Just so a model's just a model. Sometimes we have to say that's why we need to pilot, which means is our word for trying things out.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. Live
interesting.
conditions are so critical.
Absolutely, and it's always interesting for us as vendors, whether that's in this digital solutions group that Kirk and I are both in now, or whether it's in our past lives selling actual physical products. But the robustness
Hmm.
required to get into municipal and especially municipal wastewater operations is surprising sometimes. It's sometimes easier to get into industrial stuff that you would think of as being really hardened and difficult to get into, and it's actually easier there than to get into the municipal side of things sometimes.
Mm.
it brings me to something you said earlier that kind of jogged my memory, and now this transitions nicely to that. When you guys are testing something new, whether that be a digital product or a real world physical product, we've been hearing a lot about workforce changes in the industry in general, and sort of trying to get utilities to come up to speed with the changes they need to make in order to put some of these products into place in a more commercial fashion. So from an R&D perspective, you talked about bringing people on temporarily to do testing and to maybe to run things. How does that transition as you bring somebody on? If you bring on a product that requires a data scientist and then you decide to put that product on commercially, that means that your utility then has to go out and hire a new data scientist for a position that maybe didn't exist before. So can you talk a little bit about how that process works, and sort of how that transition working, that sort of new workforce, or is that not happening at all?
I think so. We have a really good team and an active conversation about topics like that between our, really supportive, like human resources department and then our executive staff. So, yes, hiring is challenging because um, as a water agency, you always want to keep costs down because it directly translates into the cost of water for the community. So there's this incentive at the board of directors level and executive level to really, run things really tight, keep costs down, and that literally translates to the cost of water because we take our like annual operating budget and expenses and use that to calculate, what we need to charge for the water. In our case, the local groundwater supply, we function like a wholesaler. So the different cities, for example, will purchase the water and pump it out of the wells they own. So we will set the price of water that we charge really to cover our costs. And so as you can imagine, if you're hiring, you might have leadership or a board member that's doing their job and will question that to make sure, is this really necessary? Because, it's going to translate to increased costs and therefore increased cost of water for the community. So we don't take it lightly, but yes, I would say when there's a need and it can be justified and it's going to improve and enhance the organization, we will make those hires, and we have to stay relevant, stay on top of things, and have the technical depth that we need. So you bring up the example of data scientist. I think that's a good one. Yes, it is something that water agencies are talking about. We see that more and more that sort of data awareness and depth of knowledge is becoming important. In the shorter term, that can be addressed perhaps through consulting, right? Because there's a huge universe out there of engineering firms and consulting firms that act as like extension of staff for water agencies so that you can kind of hire as needed to get the support you need. So that could be one way to um, stay on top of digitalization type topics that maybe you don't feel like you have the in-house staff for. But at the end of the day, you need some in-house component of that too. In our R&D team, we do happen to have a data scientist, so that's really nice for us. So we have that, between molecular biology to soil science to data science, microbiology. I'm an environmental engineer. We have membrane people, so we are able to work on some data projects within R&D through our data scientists. Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect you guys have some resources that other, smaller, mid-sized utilities just can't bring to bear on things like that. Which is why I asked the question, because it's interesting to see the differences between a utility like yours that can really afford to be an early adopter of some of this stuff, because you have resources to bring to bear to test it all, to try it out, to bring new people online. But then how does that translate to the rest of the utility world in the United States and beyond that can't do that type of stuff? Yeah, it's tough.
I think on the data side, one thing I'm seeing is that in your so utilities will generally have like an IT department, of course, and those folks are being asked to do more and more these days because of this surge in interest around data science, digitalization, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And so if you get approached with about a technology or a project that has that component, you can potentially lean on your IT group, depending on, their availability and knowledge. But they still have their other jobs to do. So I think that conversation is happening right now at organizations. And and I've learned recently about concepts such as IT OT convergence. So
Hmm.
I know Miller knows about this because he hosted the seminar about it. But yeah, this idea that to what extent, when you think of your org chart and your people and hiring and who leads that, how much do you think about that integration of the classical IT stuff with the operations technology stuff, which might be the group you think of when you think of like a new a digital platform that might help you run your treatment plant better and more
Hmm.
efficiently. And those groups are, I guess, classically pretty segregated, and maybe the IT folks not really knowing what the OT group does. Um, and so there's talk of this, coming together a little bit more. So we are having those conversations as well. And at a minimum, just get to know what your coworkers are doing and have those conversations. That's step one. And
Yep.
what resources you have.
Two sides of the boat trying to row the same direction, even though they might be being managed by different people. And it's kind of an interesting problem to try and solve. And yeah, shout out to Swan and the
Yes.
ITOT convergence webinar that we did last month. That was a really
Yes.
interesting conversation on that exact topic.
And we're new members of Swan, and we've been really enjoying it. So
Nice.
just, good online resources and, webinars and stuff like that. So it's been fun, and, Teams meetings and whatnot to join and talk about stuff. So it's been cool. Yeah, great way to kind of trying to bring that conversation up, psychologically within the organization. Step one. Yeah.
Nice. I was, we've been talking a lot about digitization and things of that nature, but I know that's not the primary topic. When you guys are R&D and stuff, how do you pick? I mean, is that something that your staff is bringing to you to say, hey, we're struggling with
Hmm.
this. This is our biggest challenge. Can you find something? So, or is it more coming to you, or do you go after it?
It's a little bit of both, but when it's coming to us, it's probably more from the external side.
Okay.
There's still that internal component. You're right, like folks within the agency, having some challenge and bringing it to R&D, having that conversation. This To do that, you want to tear down the silos, right? That can happen within, an organization between departments. So for us, just making sure R&D is present. So we're at key internal meetings of our organization. We're
Hmm.
getting to know the challenges of other departments. So yes, there's that internal conversation about what is, something that we need our R&D team to work on. But it also comes from external, meaning just, yeah, getting reached out to by a university or, a startup company or an established company with a new concept. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I get that asked that question. How do you, choose what to work on or come up with
Right.
the ideas? I admit it's pretty organic. I've thought about, like, should there be like some kind of structure, like, workshopping and then prioritizing and weighting criteria and making lists and stuff. I've thought about that, but I feel like we land on some really good stuff without necessarily having to over administer that process, if that makes sense. I
Sure.
like the way we do it now. But yeah, it's organic. I would say going to conferences is important too. And that can be hard because utilities have limited travel budgets, again, trying to keep costs down. But
Hmm.
just keeping your finger on the pulse of what's out there. There's so many good water and wastewater conferences. It's so important to talk to people and to bring up your staff and not just having like the executives from the utility there, right?
Right.
So just going to the sessions, meeting companies. I had a great conversation at a dinner with a startup company that just spun out of a university that has like a PFAS destruction technology, and they just got
Hmm.
like a bunch of investor funding, and it's like five really young people that are super excited, and they just wanted some RO concentrate so bad to be able to play with in their lab. And we say, yes, we will mail you some RO concentrate. So not only are you learning about what's out there, but you're just part of that ecosystem of innovation and facilitating
Yep.
that and providing that utility perspective. So I don't know where I'm going with this question now, but yeah, we learn about cool
Hmm.
stuff, conferences, talking to people, internal, external. And the hard part is choosing what to work on, because then you're choosing something not to work on. We're not 20 people. We're like, 6 to 8 people in my group. Depending on like whether we have a postdoc right then is why I use the variable number. We also have an army of undergraduate interns. We have 5. But
Oh,
yeah, you
nice.
can't work on everything. And so that, I think what it comes down to is then talking with the other staff internally, like maybe going
Mhm.
to our plant director and saying, what do you think? Like, this university has this really interesting modeling idea to minimize energy use for RO. Um, Although we're not quite sure it's a good fit for us for this reason, should we do it anyways? Or,
Oh,
should we spend that time on something else? So maybe we'll get, the opinions of our really experienced, leadership and other staff, and we have to pick. And sometimes we have to say no, and that's hard. I wish we could say yes to every technology provider or university that wants to model something and do a project and write a paper, but we do run out of time in a typical week. So have to be a little bit
absolutely.
choosy. Yeah.
Well, and a follow-up question to that, I'm assuming you guys have a budget.
Yes.
So, that's another reason you can't, these people are out trying to pilot, not everything's free, obviously. So, you have to have a budget and
Mm-hmm.
you have to make
Mm-hmm.
decisions based on what that budget is. Does it make sense? Is it going to benefit us? Do we see a benefit even beyond the pilot and things of that nature? So I'm sure that's
Mm-hmm.
a very well thought out decision to make those decisions. So,
Yeah, yeah, you're right. We do have to take into account what's it going to cost, and it is wonderful if we can try out something at no cost to us because we are putting in the time and
yeah.
if it's a water treatment technology, we're grabbing samples and sending that to our lab and then giving all that data to the technology provider. So we feel like we
Hmm.
bring something to the table, a test bed, our insights, and all the data we're collecting, and we're very transparent and share. But
Nice.
the technology provider or the university cannot always just do the project, do the
Right.
collaboration at no cost. So then it's that discussion of like, is there going to be, an annual fee to rent the equipment or to try out the digital solution? So it
Right.
really just kind of seems to vary. I found a lot of variability there, which makes sense because it's a collaboration and the other partner has
Hmm.
to think about their budget. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Makes a
with
lot of sense.
universities, that can often mean we decide to wait so that we can pursue a grant together. So it delays your work by a year
Mm.
because you're writing a proposal. Maybe the university leads something to try to get funding from National Science Foundation or EPA or the Water Research Foundation. And so we cross our fingers and hope some funding comes through and then do a project together.
So that kind of transitions to a set of questions I wanted to get into a little bit with you. In thinking about this in terms of maybe best practices for the water utility industry overall, who probably, again, like we said, don't have the resources that an Orange County Water District might have for doing, really rigorous R&D constantly. If you were going to give advice to someone about setting one of these things up, what would what are like the two or three main things to look at when if there's somebody wants to try something new and put it through its paces before committing to it commercially? Are there some basic tenets that people should follow there?
So kind of our process for thinking about whether we're going to do a project and test something, pilot something.
Yeah, right, exactly. How do you
Yeah,
make those decisions? How do you
right.
agree on what is proof of success or failure of testing something?
Mhm.
Those sorts of things. Is there anything there that might be
Right.
worth giving advice to
Yeah,
folks who
yeah,
don't have R&D departments?
right. Yeah, I think the advice might sound almost too simple, but first let's say it's a university with a concept or a technology company, large or small, with a concept. First, exchanging information, getting to know each other, which is a lot easier these days in the virtual space to have meetings. So we might have a series of first an introductory meeting. We introduce ourselves as an agency, and they introduce their technology, provide some information. Maybe they've provided some written information in advance. I'm thinking more like companies, but universities too, if they have a concept, and then see if it's a fit. And sometimes um, maybe it's very early days, and all the ask is that they want some water samples or some data from our facility that they could put into a digital solution and kind of explore the data. So we can often start by just providing water samples or maybe data or whatever would be relevant to the conversation. And I have one recent example where a PFAS treatment technology provider with an adsorbent. They're a startup company. They have something they think is very promising. So we sent them water samples. They did a bunch of lab work. They presented that lab work to us. We gave them some feedback. Now they're going to do some more lab work. So often it's this conversation. Maybe you're having a check-in meeting, several months later, because it can take a while. So you get to the point where there's enough data. So we want to see some data, some evidence that it could work, right? And then the next step would be making that decision on whether to kind of do another, bigger phase of testing, might be piloting. So I guess the short, trying to summarize that, would be, yeah, information exchange, learning from each other, see if it's a fit, develop some kind of evidence that you think it could work at your site, and then consider more testing. And one thing I've learned is perhaps try to attempt some kind of economic analysis even before you pilot, if that is at all possible, because you can imagine a situation where if you got the most incredible results from the pilot, like it was a slam dunk, it totally worked, but then you take into account the cost. Is that cost benefit there? Is that something you would implement for that cost? And that can be tricky. I'm not an expert in doing a cost, prediction, and it just depends on the case. But perhaps the technology provider is able to provide a cost estimate of implementation at your plant. Perhaps your coworkers or your organization, your engineering department, can provide some kind of develop an estimate, or perhaps you can bring on consulting support. So you may even want to do some kind of high level cost estimate of what it would cost to implement a technology at your facility before you even consider piloting it. Because if it's too costly for you you're not going to be worth the benefit, even in the best case, then you shouldn't spend a year or two piloting it.
If it's $10 million a year and your budget is $2 million a year, it doesn't matter how much of a slam dunk it is. You just can't do it. That absolutely makes sense. But I want to go back to the first part, what you were talking about, because I think that's a really important nugget of wisdom. There is a commitment from the utility person's end to sort of maintain that communication and that relationship, and that it's a two-way conversation, even from the early stages of deciding to test something. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of the testing and a lot of the sort of utility side, rolling out of new products and new ideas and new concepts, a lot of that falls on the vendors or researchers to sort of drive that conversation, because they're seen as the ones who want to do something. And for the utility people, especially those who don't have maybe like a dedicated R&D group, it's just a chore to kind of maintain that extra conversation on top of their normal jobs. And I think that's really important to note that, if you're going to take something on as something new, it's a two-way street, and both sides have to be committed to that back and forth communication. It's hard to do.
Yes. And this will probably sound like too in the weeds, but something that really helps me is just putting something on your calendar like 9 months from now or even a year from now to follow up. Like, we'll hear something promising. Maybe it's a brand new startup company just spun out of a university, and they have, let's say, a PFAS sensor. And it sounds like, gosh, they're bringing their detection limits down. Like, this could really work. But it's going to take a year realistically, right? At least. And so I will literally put a reminder for myself on my calendar for a year from then.
Nice.
And I'll attach the email correspondence, and that's kind of the technology scouting side, I guess. And so even though we have a little more bandwidth for that in our being a dedicated R&D group, I think those kinds of strategies can be implemented by really any, utility employee. If you meet someone at a conference, you don't have to deal with it. Compelling. You don't have to deal with it the next week you get back from the conference. Like, put the information on your calendar 3 months out, and then push it out if you need to. But there's just such a universe of stuff out there and people to meet and ideas, and it's kind of hard to track it all. So that's something that's helped me.
So with being in R&D, being that you see all this new stuff, which I like that. I'm like a product tester when I'm at home, so I get that. It's a fun environment to be in. What's been your favorite thing to implement at Orange County Water District?
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm trying to think of some different examples. I think we've been really proud of how much our PFAS work has been utilized by the district. PFAS hit us pretty hard. a few years ago when California announced certain notification limits and response levels. And then since then, the federal MCLs have come out that are even more stringent. And so as a groundwater management agency, it hit us pretty hard because we have certain locations in our region in North and Central Orange County where there is PFAS present in the groundwater, especially near like the Santa Ana River. And it's very low trace concentrations, but it is just above the drinking water limits. And so, we function as a wholesaler. The different cities and local water agencies pump groundwater out of the ground and in many cases simply, disinfect the water and then put it into the distribution system. But at some locations, they have this PFAS. And so we've been building PFAS treatment plants together in partnership with those water retailers for a few years now. We're building actually a total of 60 plants, 60. It's unbelievable. So these are relatively small facilities right at the wellhead that can remove the PFAS before it's served as drinking water. And it was our R&D team that did all of the testing to select the types of adsorbents to be used in those treatment systems that, the water filters through the adsorbent media and absorbs the PFAS and goes out PFAS free. So it was interesting because you talked about how do you choose projects.
Yeah.
We have a portion of our team that studies aspects related to groundwater and groundwater recharge, since that's a big activity for Orange County Water District. And we had just wound down a couple cool projects and we're trying to figure out what to do next. And normally that's not a challenge because stuff just falls in your lap. But we realized, we're not sure what to prioritize next. So we had just started doing some like internal workshops and thinking about going to some targeted conferences to identify like a groundwater or groundwater recharge related project. Well, then it fell into our lap like it always does, which was PFAS. And so that team started doing, in cooperation with our consultant, which was Jacobs, started putting together a plan for piloting. So we piloted a whole bunch of different PFAS treatment medias, and ultimately one of those performed the best and was the most cost effective, and that's what's being put into a lot of those treatment plants. So that's been really exciting to see in such a condensed time frame, because usually it's not that fast, of the hard work we did and the data we developed being immediately used to make a decision at the district. So I would say what we do as a team, it borders between like the researchy stuff, still very applied research, to the very practical, like test these different commercially available products, see what works best, implement it. So sometimes that implementation time frame is pretty short depending on the need. So.
And that has to be very rewarding on something like that, too, because not only are you helping your utility to stay in compliance with the state regulators, you're also actually having a real-world effect on the quality of the water that's going out into the distribution system. That has to feel good when you get that right, especially in a short time frame, like you said. That's got to be great.
It does. And I think that's also something special about working at a water agency, whether you're an R&D or anything, you're working on something in your own backyard, right? Like every community has the water and wastewater agencies. And when you work at one of those agencies, you are supporting something that is immediate in your community. So you have that sort of tangible impact. And I think that feels really good.
That's very cool.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I could see being very proud of that. And like you said, going home, and it's always fun to work in a facility. And, for me, I'm usually traveling somewhere and working on these facilities, but you go and you work on something and then you go to the hotel and take a shower. Then I'm like, oh yeah, this is the same water that I was looking at earlier today.
Right.
It's kind of fun.
Oh, that's funny. I guess another question. I mean, is it hard to recruit people do you have like people banging down your door to want to join your team?
It's probably more the latter. Yeah.
Nice.
I'd certainly get, pings from students that are graduating. Maybe their professor knows about the OCWD R&D group. So no, we just have positions every now and then. I wish I could hire all the time. But yeah, we actually just went through a recruitment process to hire a postdoc. So universities more traditionally have postdoctoral research associates, right? So postdocs that have just completed their PhD, and then they move typically to a different university to do a 2 to 3 year long postdoc before going on and becoming a professor. And we decided to roll out a postdoc program as of a few years ago. And there are some other water agencies like Southern Nevada Water Authority that have a similar program within their research or innovation unit. And so it's a great way to get through a limited term, meaning like a temp contract, to extend your research capabilities. So you have someone that recently completed their PhD in some field, and they many of them really are open to having a postdoc at a water agency, because that sounds kind of pretty unique compared to maybe the more traditional path of going to a university. And so we're able to bring in a postdoc. We just did a recruitment for a person that's starting on Monday, so I'm excited to work on PFAS. So speaking of the piloting, we're still piloting for other various reasons. We have ongoing phases of testing.
Sure.
So she'll be working on that, but it's a great way to kind of add to the staff. And those on our postdocs, either they go on and become professors afterwards, if that's their passion to teach and maybe at a research university, or not. They may find that they're interested in kind of sticking with, I would say maybe a more applied side of the work, and finding maybe they find a position at a technology company or consulting engineering. So that's been a really rewarding component of our R&D department as well.
Wow, love that. So I have a two-part question for you as well. So how has the utility changed since you've been there? And then where do you see the utility going in the future, like in the next 5 years? 10 years, maybe.
Ooh,
It probably
those
10
are
years
hard
because we
ones.
move slow.
Kirk asks the hard questions.
Those are big. This is a thesis defense now.
We don't have to answer. You can say, nope, I'm good.
How has it changed since I've been there? Like as a result of me?
Yeah, whether it's you, what you've seen.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering. Maybe it's just, we've gone from, like we always talk about in our work, maybe we've just gone from a paper log to a digital log. It could be something that's simple that saved you guys time. I don't, I'm just looking at, things that are exciting to you,
Right.
that you feel have been a big game changer, and it can be tiny. I think of driving a car, for me, it's, I'm a little bit older, so there wasn't cruise control when I started driving, but now there is cruise control, right? So that's pretty cool.
Right.
Most of my kids don't even know what that is.
I've been there about 10 years now, so it is kind of a nice time to reflect. This fall will be coming up on my 10-year anniversary with the organization, so that's pretty cool. I would say one thing I tried really hard to do was promote that internal dialogue a little bit more. Given that the research group is, as far as what research does, what our group is here for, given that we are a bit shielded from the day-to-day of running a water agency and running a treatment plant, it can be easy to get a little bit siloed to be we're literally in like a different building, off by ourselves on our campus, right? You can get kind of siloed, and you have such intense relationships with external partners like the universities, their students, the technology companies, that those folks can feel more like your coworkers sometimes. And I wanted to make sure in my role that we made sure we were really integrated with the rest of the district. So that's something that I've tried to work on since I've been there. Which is kind of an organic process with different strategies, right? But another thing that changed, not as a result of me, but has been exciting, and something we've got to support, was our final expansion of the plant. So I got to witness our world's largest facility become still the world's largest facility, but just bigger, when we expanded from 70 million gallons per day production to 130 million gallons per day production of the purified water. So our site was a construction site right outside my window for a few years. And our R&D team did some of the work to help choose things like what type of ultrafiltration membranes, for example, to put into the expanded facility. So that's been fun to be a part of since I've been there.
Awesome.
I forgot your second question, though. You have to say it again.
The second part was, where do you see it going? What's the next thing? Where do we see this going?
Right. I wish I had that crystal ball. I think digitalization. So topic near and dear to your hearts, right?
Yes, very much.
So I think this artificial intelligence thing, right? The elephant in the room. On the one hand, it's very exciting and very motivating, a little bit um, challenging or maybe a little scary sometimes. Just scary, I mean, in not a scary way, but just the fact that knowing something's going to change, right? Um, on the other hand, it can be just kind of hard to understand and sometimes sounds like marketing fluff. And we're trying to like unpack that and figure out like what are we really talking about? Like
Right.
what could we actually implement? So, but and I know that digitalization itself is not a new thing. I mean, if you look at reports and stuff coming out of the Water Research Foundation, I mean, yes, this has been a conversation in the water sector for a little while, but I think the AI excitement has really helped bring it up even more and motivate leadership at utilities to really think about it and understand where do we need to become more digitalized and how can we improve. So I think that's what's here now and is kind of what's next in terms of potential focus areas for innovation minded
Right.
utilities and for research groups for those that work on innovative topics on behalf of their agencies.
And it's a great thing that you're pointing out too. That there's kind of a difference between what is here now, which is the yes, we can do this if you've got data streams to work on. They can be applied to various different types of digital products, but that doesn't necessarily answer the question of okay, what should we be doing with this long term? What's the actual outcome that we're chasing with what do we want this thing to do? Because AI can do a whole bunch of different things, but do they actually do they serve a pain point? Do they solve a problem? Does this affect the way that you're going to run your utility over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And I think that's the part that the industry is still trying to answer. It's we've proven now, I think everybody has proven, okay, you can roll these things out and have them as a commercial product. Now what do you do with it, and is it valuable? And that's the part that still has to be proven in a lot of different ways, because there's 15 different ways that you could run with AI. Everything from using an LLM to keep yourself organized, like the stuff that we do, tasks day to day, all the way through like process optimization that's really specific to one water treatment process, and everything in between. And how do you apply that stuff, and does it solve a problem?
Right.
I think that's part of what your group will likely, and I know already is, trying to look at for your specific utility is, okay, that's great that these things are out here. Let's prove that they do something that we would actually want long term.
Right.
Yes.
So how's that going? I'll prompt you to talk openly about that if you want to.
It's hard. I feel like oftentimes it is the hammer looking for the nail, where we have a technology company or a university with a concept for a machine learning, study. So we're being pitched something, and they don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of our operations, which is fair. And so it's kind of on us to figure out, like, well, can we use that? Of course, but we're also not the experts in what they're talking about. So just navigating that, having that conversation is super hard because we're being told about something, pitched something, some kind of AI related thing, or maybe not, maybe more broadly a digital solution of some kind, and it can feel like the hammer looking for the nail. Um, and then conversely, if we say forget about don't start by thinking about what's out there, just think about what your problem is, right? What solution are you trying to solve? Like, what need do we have? We kind of come up short sometimes articulating that. It's a more difficult discussion than you would think within maybe your operations team, or let's say it's your GIS group that's been doing something a certain way with groundwater modeling for years, or something else. So to use the operations team example, like our plant is pretty dialed in. Like the team kind of knows what they're doing. They run things smoothly. They have that human intelligence, right, that they're comfortable with. They're kind of used to the tools that they have, like how the SCADA system works and how data is retrieved. And so they're not necessarily saying they've got this thing that's been bothering them that they need a digital solution for. So both sides of it are hard, and we're trying to figure out. That's what I'm trying to say, and we're trying to navigate that. I think where we end up sometimes is it is almost easier to the first thing to hear about what's out there, have those conversations, and invite people in to explain what their dashboard is about, what their AI model can do, what their digital solution is. And then it's on us to, even if it doesn't seem like an immediate fit, like we can't expect them to know our plant that well, right? So instead of maybe dismissing it a little too quickly, I think it's on us to really have those deep thoughts about, like, is there a way that this service that we're hearing about, or this potential, machine learning tool or whatever it is there a way that we could, bend this to our will? And I bet you that partner would be really willing and excited to, like, maybe adapt something that might be to a better fit for us. So that's where my thinking been, is this struggle between, is it up to us to come up with the problem and say, here's what we need you guys to solve and give us a digital solution for, or is it about just seeing what's out there and then trying to see if we can fit it to our fit that hammer to our nail?
And it's something that we talk about a lot, and I sometimes joke about, and I say this as somebody who works for a tech company that is building these products, but it does sometimes feel like you're using a grenade launcher to get a fly out of your house. Can be a little bit of overkill. So again, like you said, look, we have a big hammer and we have to find a big nail. And if we don't find a big nail, or do we really want to use that big hammer on some of the littler stuff, or is that just unnecessary? Yeah. And it's fun to try and navigate that. And it's also fun to try and navigate that, I think, with all the different size and shape of utility groups that are out there, because some, like OCWD, have real, big operations, big potential problems, but then they also have a lot of resources. They've solved a lot of you've solved a lot of your own problems by doing piloting and research and having a really good operations group that knows what they're doing and has, decades of experience. And so, do you need those big hammer solutions for any of the problems?
Right.
Maybe not.
Right.
But then the utility group down the road that's small and has a 1 MGD system and one guy who operates it and no night shift and no alarms and all that, they might need actually a bigger hammer sometimes. And that's always a fun thing to navigate, is the different size of utilities and different resources that they've got. It brings up maybe a more difficult question, but kind of going back to that communication side of things we were talking about earlier. Instead of asking it as where do you think the industry is going, where would you want it to go? What do you think would be if you had a magic wand and could guide the vendors out there? What would you tell them to do?
Right. Yeah, I would say that there's all these amazing digital solutions and algorithms and with a sprinkle of AI that is out there now with a lot of potential. But in many ways, utilities aren't quite ready for it because we're not digitalized. We're a lot more, even on paper still at times, than people realize, or at least on Excel, like a lot of Excel hell, right? And so I think people are leading with the more sophisticated and sometimes less plausible sounding claims, like sophisticated, like AI, machine learning, but then claiming, oh, we can save you 30% of energy or something with these solutions. And the real benefit that I think is missed is the fact that by digging in and improving your digital system, and for example, creating some kind of dashboard platform, that's the legwork and groundwork that needs to be done first. And that's what utilities really need right now. But if you do that work, the AI will come, right? Because now you have the platform. So for example, we found that we wanted to try out a dashboard for our reverse osmosis facility. And otherwise, all the data just goes into, through the SCADA system, goes into like a data historian. And believe it or not, the way that staff access data is to go to specific workstations, just those computers that have a license, and go through like a terrible, tedious like data extraction process. And then you're trying to like transfer this file that's like too big, and then Excel can't even deal with the file because it doesn't have enough rows or whatever. So you're having to learn like Microsoft Access or whatever these other programs are called. And so the way the work is done is like pretty painful and pretty manual. So maybe it's not literally on paper, although sometimes, but still So kind of I've sort of started to learn this rule of thumb. Like if you're doing it in Excel and then you email it to somebody, maybe you're doing it wrong, or at least in kind of an outdated way. And so I think what utilities need, and maybe what's next, is to just have more data accessibility, all these discussions around data centralization. You just want people to be able to look at their phone and see what time, when the last membrane unit cleaning occurred, which is not how things are done now.
Right.
So one of our goals is to try to establish something like that for our facility. So our R&D team is working with our operations team to look at different products. So I think what we want is actually not quite so aspirational as sometimes the technologists are trying to pitch. We really just want dashboards and data access that are easy to use, look good, not glitchy, not clunky, easy to learn, and flexible, but not so flexible we have to create the whole thing. We do kind of want something that feels semi off the shelf and ready to go. But then the AI will come, then the machine learning will come, because now you have the data, now you have it centralized and accessible. And now maybe some consultant can just log in and in a secure way retrieve a bunch of data for themselves just because you give them permission that you used to have to spend hours working with staff to retrieve and send to them. So when the data is available and accessible, I think it's just going to explode even more, where things are going to get figured out and learned. And then you'll find, here's a case where a machine learning algorithm actually is doing a really good job predicting the fact that we should have cleaned those membranes a month earlier because the cleaning cost would have been, was less than, all the extra energy we were paying for to push water through fouled membranes. So I think those insights will come. We just need the digital, accessibility of information first.
And I love that you're talking about foundational, doing that foundational work first and then letting the problem or letting the solution speak for itself rather than trying to force the solution and then, make up ground on the foundational stuff that has to be done. Because that is, we fight that a lot as well. I think the idea that somebody wants something, but then as you uncover and go through the deployment process, you find out that there's 10 different things that have to be done first. And sometimes they take a long time.
Yes. But it's good to get that work done. And maybe that will be the way the client or utility realized was transformational. And it's something they didn't expect, but something they needed to get done.
Right. A lot of times they're more excited about the foundational stuff than the actual end result of the, the thing that they were originally trying to deploy. Because the foundational stuff is going to change the way they work well into the future, whether they keep using the widget or not.
Right.
Yep.
Very cool.
Wow. Well, I think that's a great way to end the show today, because we're, this went really well, really long. So I know we're a little bit over time. So, I mean, we could keep asking questions. That's easy for us to do. So we know that you're a busy person, so we don't want to do that. But I just want to thank you for being on the show today, Megan. It was a pleasure to hear your insights. And that was a great way to finish, because that's what Miller and I talk about every day, is that digital transformation, and that basically what we call pivot. So pivoting from what is before to the new, transformation, all that kind of stuff. So great way to end the show, but I really appreciate you being on the show today. It was fun.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We appreciate your unique perspective and being willing to come on and talk candidly about some of these issues, because it's important. So. Well, all right. Welcome. Thank you, everyone. This has been, once again, another episode of the Fluid Operations Podcast with Miller Truby and Kirk Wessel. Thank you very much to our guest, Megan Plumlee from Orange County Water District. We will be doing another one of these, hopefully in another month after you've seen this. We very much appreciate you watching and listening to the show, and we hope you all have a wonderful day, week, month, and we will see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.